Hi everyone, I'm Matris Kristen with the Ormus Temple, and if you've been following me, you probably know that last week I posted a cancellation to our meditation circle and cited some family issues for being the reason. Actually, those issues had more to do with me and my own learning process and how to deal with the people that are really important and very much beloved in my life, and ergo my family. So I want to take the moment to just say thank you to the people who did reach out and ask me if I was doing okay and if they could do anything to help. I thank you all so much for your concern and for your support. But what I am noticing as I'm going through my own work and my transition, that since COVID has hit, that we are all experiencing new levels of hurt and trepidation. Many of us have already been struggling as life offers its smorgasbords of ups and downs, but that being the case or not, COVID has added a deepening dimension to our stressors. And I notice that these things are happening basically on two levels. They're happening on the surface, but they're also happening in our subconscious realm, where we've stored all kinds of information from the beginning of our times in these bodies. And we're being triggered from external situations on this level, on this subconscious level. So we don't always have the opportunity to be aware that we're even being triggered. We can't even recognize that before we're off to the races and we wind up damaging some of our most precious relationships with our communications and our intimacies. So I wanted to just speak on that for a bit today. So you see, with the COVID situation, we're actually perceiving that as a threat by our physical intelligence system on a subconscious level. And like I say, we're not aware of it before we start reacting to it accordingly. And therefore, we're not really as likely to be as attentive as we should be because we're feeling attacked. We're feeling neglected and misunderstood. We feel like our situations, we're not being heard. And we come out of our mouths in this defensive posture or even offensive posture. And really what we're not recognizing is that the person on the other end, on the receiving end, is feeling the same stressors too. So now we've got a compounded situation and nobody's understanding in each other. Does that sound familiar at all to you in any of your circumstances? Well, if so, that's what meditation is actually all about. It's getting you to just slow down, to go within, and to be a little bit more reflective, to understand that what's happening with you, that you're not alone. The other person is going through that too. But let's first, before we come out of our mouths with accusations about what we're perceiving from the other person, let's take the time to look at what's really going on with us, what's really getting triggered. Because remember, I'm saying oftentimes it's being triggered at a subconscious level, so we're not consciously aware of what's going on unless we take a moment to go inside and be still and just pay attention to what's going on in there. So first of all, it's about stopping to listen, to observe, to care for the person on the other end of the equation, because after all, that is a projected reflection of you. Remember, I'm always saying our external experiences are a projected reflection of our own internal condition. So before we go off on an attack in order to try to protect ourselves, which is perfectly normal, from the perspective of our survival instinct, to just take a moment to transcend that animal part of our being and to be able, from a humanistic perspective, to see the other person, to hear the other person, and then to go in and see and hear self, to get a clear view of what's really going on inside. So often I'm finding that we're so consumed with what we're feeling and responding to from these triggers that we don't always actually catch what the other person has really said. We have an interpretation of what they said. And likewise, I'm getting the same thing back. Remember? Reflected projection of the internal experience. So just like I'm not getting what they're saying, they're not getting what I'm saying either. And when I try to stop them and go back over it, resistance comes up. Same thing for me when they try to do that. So you see, our communications are tending to break down, and we're suffering more, especially with those that we love the most. Sometimes you might just want to determine that this isn't the best time to have the communications. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own inner thoughts and the emotions that they trigger and the actions that follow that the clarity just isn't there. It's not a bad thing to say, hey, let's take a break from this and come back and deal with it a little bit later. That's not a problem. And when you do that, don't be afraid to go within and look at what's going on again inside of you. What's really going on? The thoughts. You know, not every thought that we think is true. And do you know we have the power to choose our thoughts? So if we're having negative thoughts, the first thing maybe we want to do is to determine whether that thought is really true or not, or whether it's a choice. Can you go with that choice or choose to go with an alternative choice? And which would be better? Which would give you the better outcome? So this is kind of the work you can do with yourself when you've given yourself that opportunity to take that space and come back and deal with that communication issue a little bit later. You know, issues may seem different between us, but basically our emotional responses are very much the same in that they fall into two categories. We're either coming from a perspective of love or we're coming from a perspective of apathy. Some of you might have thought I would say love or hate, but I'm not going to say that, because hate, in order to hate someone or something they're doing, you have to care. Okay? So hate is just actually the flip side of the coin for love. So I'm going to choose to say you're either coming from a position of love or apathy, of caring or not caring at all. And these can produce very different results. Now that apathy perspective is usually a fear-based response. Back again to the animal instinct: fight, flight, freeze, feed, or fornicate. In other words, we're just operating off of triggers that have ignited our endocrine system and chemically put us into a position to respond to that trigger, feeling as though we are under some kind of attack and we need to preserve our own well-being. Now, when we're in that fear state of being, it's natural to care about self at the sacrifice of someone else, because we're feeling like that someone else is not acting in our best interest, like they're attacking us. So we move into this position of being apathetic. Now, they call that fear-based. They call that the left-hand path, because basically we're going all out for self at the expense of anything or anybody else for that reason. And it, like I said, it's usually driven by a fear-based response, a need to protect and to survive for self that's so strong that we're willing to throw anything or anybody else up under the bus. And we do have a lot of fears that are associated in that realm by which we're being programmed on a daily basis. Tell me about how many of the entertainment sources you're looking at don't deal with violence. You're probably seeing violence all the time in your entertainment. And if you're like a lot of people, I happen to know you're probably living in a fairly violent environment. And if you're not right in that environment is being brought to you daily in the news and the things that we're seeing social media, so on and so forth. A lot of violence. Is there any wonder why we wouldn't go into survival mode and feel like, look, I got to make sure I survive first? Now, the other side of that, the love-based path, is a collective one. And this is the one that the ancient masters have subscribed to. People like Yeshua and the Buddha, the ancient Kamau people, all of these, the people of India are always talking about transcending the animal response mode in the physical system and working from the divine spirited soul. But to do that, we have to rise above our fear. And as long as we're being held in a perspective of fear by the things that we're hearing and reading and getting, being advised from the media, from our friends, our associates, from the environment we live in, as long as we are staying in that fear, we will have a tendency to respond from our animal nature and to be more or less apathetic to anything else, because survival comes first. We're afraid of two things. We're afraid of any amount of suffering, and we're afraid of physical death. We seem to have forgotten what our ancestors stood on before, and that is our spiritual immortality. Our ancestors were willing to do with who Yeshua would say, lay their lives down for the greater good of those coming with them and those coming after them. So we had people among our ancestors that did everything from throwing themselves off the ships in the ocean to fighting the good fight of faith, losing their lives, getting caught and being tortured, and going out and doing it again because they believed in the greater good. They believed in the sanctity of the collective one. They believed in these things. So, and it overrode their animalistic instinct for survival and the fears associated with suffering and death. These things are active right now in our society. Think about the decisions that you're making, the perspectives you're holding, and how you're relating in the emotional relationships that you're in. Are you working from a spirit of love, caring, unity? Can you care enough to take the time to listen, to put yourself in a humble position, to allow the other person to be heard and understood? Do you care enough to walk away when you feel offended and come back later in order to exercise something for the greater good? As long as we're working from the animal instinct, the best we can do is revolutionary. We can keep changing positions. We can fight a good fight, we can win, but we're only going to repeat the same mistakes, the carelessness for the lives of others that has been perpetuated upon the oppressed. It's just going to keep switching classes. That's revolving, revolutionary. But this is not a time for revolution. This is a time to evolve. This is the time in which we must transcend our animal nature, our fear-based triggered responses. We have to come from the spirited soul, from the divine connection within us, and move beyond that. We have to be able to learn to see how we fit together synchronistically as a whole if we're going to survive on this planet at all. There are just so many influences at work that try to keep us pitted against each other. For those of us who are seeking to explore and learn and live our ancient African spiritual philosophies and practices, we come under fire from our Christian brothers and sisters. We also put our Christian brothers and sisters under fire for following the white man's religion. But it's not that easy because the African perception, the ancient spirituality comes through on the Christianity that we practice today. And anybody who's paying attention can see that. For example, where do you think this comes from? Brothers and sisters, you see us do this in church, right? What are we doing? What? We're projecting our intention through our spiritual energy for the best intention for whoever we're directing this prayer to. Isn't that what we're doing? What about speaking in tongues? Right? Now, these aren't things you're necessarily going to see in the Catholic Church or the Episcopalian Church or, something that it may be more akin to the Christianity that comes out of Rome. But it does show a definite connection to our own ancestral heritage that has come through with Christianity today, right? Now, when we all want to acknowledge that Yeshua was a melanated individual. So what's the issue? Back to speaking in tongues. Speaking in tongues it's an advanced practice of actually disengaging the logic of your left brain so that you can be open to receive the unexpected. The thing that doesn't make sense to the logical mind, for those of us who are so peculiar, to the potential, the possibility that's coming in through the crown, coming down through the first eye, lodging in the heart to bring us through our transcendental experience. Speaking in tongues, disengaging the logic of the left brain. What about spells and symbols? We see that as well in Christianity. What did Yeshua do for the blind man? Did he not take spit and dirt and make a concoction? What did he do? Didn't he make a symbol on the ground in order to save the harlot from being stoned? These things are nothing new, and they're not so adverse to the teachings that Yeshua himself was teaching and that we have picked up on as the African descendants here. We've carried that over with us. So why, brothers and sisters, are we fighting each other? Why are we trying to see each other so different? I just submit to you that these are outside interferences which we just cannot allow to sway us any longer. We have to be able to rise above our animal instinct, transcending to our divine mind, casting out all fears, for surely God has not given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of love, of wisdom, and a strong mind. Spirit of fear is not of God, and it is not of us. It's of the animal instinct, and it was there for a reason. So I'm not going to say you discount it completely, but it definitely has to be put in its place. The divine mind has to rule, and that is a mind of love and compassion. That is a mind of sacrifice, who would step back, who would take a humble position to allow the truth to unfold, knowing in faith that that is exactly the only thing that can happen. Who will lay your life down for your brother because there is something greater, and because we know that we're only talking about our physical body. Our immortal soul is the one that's immortal. So you take your choice. You can make a decision to save your body and lose your soul. Which will you choose? And last of all, I want to share with you something that I picked up at the end of a movie I watched yesterday called Imperial Dreams on Netflix. Maybe you might want to check it out. The main character is a writer who has come out of being incarcerated and is trying to get published. And he's trying to evolve. He's trying to make that jump and move beyond what he's been programmed his whole life as a way of living. Not only him, but for generations coming to him, that same program has been building and building. And he's trying to do something different through his writing. So he writes this piece called Truth and Reality. I'm going to just share it with you, and then I'll close. It goes like this. In the hood, you carry truth in the heart, while reality stays stashed outside. Your heart says don't kill. The hood says kill. Your heart says think before you act. And the hood says react. But you're all alone when one of these reactions lands you behind bars, going over every little thing in the darkness. It's easy to recognize your truth in retrospect. What's hard is being true in the moment, even if it kills you. So, food for thought. Remember, beloved, your physical body, our physical bodies all come and go. Don't give up your soul. Don't fall for the same old, same old. This is the time to evolve. To evolve in love and the ability to see the synchronicity that holds us together as one body. I see it on the horizon, and I hold it dear to my heart and present in my mind at all times. Thank you for listening. Hotep.